When you think of the Industrial Revolution, you probably imagine smoky factories, child labor, and the invention of the steam engine. But did you know that there was actually a second Industrial Revolution? And this one was even more impactful than the first? This is the story of the Second Industrial Revolution. After the First Industrial Revolution, Britain and other Western European nations were left standing tall. They had transformed their economies from agricultural to industrial and were experiencing unprecedented growth. But they wouldn't be able to maintain this position for much longer, because now everyone else wanted in on the action. Now, if you want to become the world's leading industrial power, you need all the tools that come with it. One of these tools was steel. For centuries, iron had been used to build everything from tools to ships to entire bridges. But iron wasn't exactly perfect. For starters, it rusted really easily. Secondly, there just wasn't enough of it. Meanwhile, there was an abundant supply of a similar material, steel. Steel was already being used in small amounts for things like cutlery and springs. But its production was expensive and difficult. It all changed when Henry Bessemer invented his steel-making process in 1856. It consisted of injecting air into molten iron to burn off impurities and make steel. Steel was strong and didn't rust like iron, so it became the preferred material for construction and industry. In fact, the Eiffel Tower was built entirely out of steel. Using steel instead of iron made bridges stronger, cheaper, and more efficient. Steel rails allowed trains to travel further and faster. And believe it or not, steel was even used to make ships stronger and safer. This new material helped to strengthen the foundations of industrial powers across the world. But while steel was incredibly useful, it required a lot of energy to produce. Luckily, a new energy source would soon arrive that would completely transform the face of the industrial world. But before we get to that, if you're enjoying this video, why not learn more about the Industrial Revolution by checking out our full series? Before the late 1800s, most of the world ran on muscle power, water power, or steam power. But in 1859, a man named James Watt found a way to harness another source of power, oil. At the time, oil was considered a nuisance. People would often find oil seeping out of the ground and ruining their crops. So naturally, they tried to get rid of it. In some cases, they would simply dig a hole and burn the oil. But Watt figured that this nasty black liquid could be used for something better. He had discovered a well in western Pennsylvania that produced gallons of oil every day. With the help of a friend, he created the first oil-powered engine. Fortunately, the engine failed, but it wouldn't be long before someone else succeeded. In 1870, two brothers named John and William founded the Pennsylvania Oil Company. They grew up watching whales get chopped up to lubricate the gears of ships. So when it came to oil, they knew a thing or two. Their oil company quickly expanded and needed a more efficient way of extracting oil from the ground. They turned to a man named Edwin Drake, hired him, and gave him a simple task: drill for oil. Drake's team set up a rig in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and started digging. After 27 days, they hit oil. This moment marked the beginning of modern petroleum production. By the end of the century, Drake's well had created $10 million worth of wealth. Oil was extremely useful for powering engines and machines, but it also had other uses. It could be turned into kerosene, which was then used in lamps to light homes and cities. The abundance of oil would lead to the development of many new industries such as gasoline, asphalt, and plastics. Oil literally changed the world. For example, thanks to oil-powered engines, cars and planes could finally become a reality. There are countless examples of what can be done with oil. If you want to hear more about it, check out our video on Standard Oil. Perhaps the biggest change of all during the Second Industrial Revolution was the invention of electricity. It had taken decades for the steam engine to replace water power, but electricity replaced both water and steam power. That's because electricity was the most versatile and powerful energy source yet. Although electricity had been studied for centuries, no one really knew how to use it. That all changed in 1879, when Thomas Edison invented the first practical, incandescent light bulb. It was a very fragile bulb with a very short lifespan. But with the help of his assistant Nikola Tesla, Edison would soon perfect the design. The light bulb instantly changed people's lives. Street lights made cities safer at night, and electric appliances made life easier and more enjoyable. Soon, factories were running around the clock. But electricity was even more useful inside factories. Before electricity, the only option for power was the steam engine. Not only were steam engines bulky and inefficient, but they also produced toxic waste. Factories had to have big smokestacks just to get rid of it. On top of that, the steam engine could only run at a constant speed. But with electricity, all of those problems were solved. Electric motors could be installed right next to the machines they powered. They were more efficient, more reliable, and they didn't produce toxic waste. Plus, electric motors could be powered at different speeds. This meant that workers could mass-produce items at record rates. You could make almost anything out of almost any material. It just needed an electric motor to power the machine that did it. For example, you might have heard of the assembly line. It was a revolutionary idea that made factories more efficient and products cheaper. But did you know that it was actually just a series of machines performing one action each? The Ford Motor Company was the first to use the assembly line, but other companies quickly caught on and began implementing them into their factories. But even though the Second Industrial Revolution was mostly about machines, there were still plenty of innovations invented by hand, such as the telephone by Alexander Graham Bell and the first commercial airplane by the Wright brothers. These innovations were quickly picked up by factories and production lines and then mass-produced. Inventions like the telephone went from being a luxury item to a household item within a matter of years. The Second Industrial Revolution was truly a global phenomenon. Some places benefited more than others, such as Germany and the United States. The US was filled with wide-open spaces, natural resources, and immigrants willing to work hard. All they needed was a reason to do it. Enter Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie was a Scottish immigrant who worked his way up from a low-level telegraph operator to the owner of the largest steel company in the world. Like many rich people at the time, he believed in philanthropy. He knew that he didn't get to where he was all by himself and wanted to give back. So he donated millions to libraries, universities, and charities. Many people saw him as a model rich man, someone who got rich but didn't forget about the less fortunate. Carnegie eventually sold his steel company to J.P. Morgan, who would later form a company called General Electric. It would go on to become one of the biggest companies in America, and it all started with the work of just one man. But sometimes it takes more than one person to start a giant corporation. Take the example of the famous automaker Henry Ford. Ford was known for creating the first car, but did you know that he didn't do it alone? His company was actually a partnership between himself and two of his friends. Together, they formed the Ford Motor Company and manufactured the first quadricycle. It wasn't long before they were mass-producing cars. In fact, by 1920, Ford was the largest automobile manufacturer in the world. He changed how cars were made forever by introducing the assembly line. This led to huge increases in production and massive profits. Speaking of profits, did you know that the world's first billionaire was born during this revolution? His name was John Rockefeller. He grew up poor and working class, but became fascinated with business. While working at his father's grocery store, he learned that buying items in bulk saved money. He decided to apply this knowledge to oil and created Standard Oil. At the time, there were thousands of small oil companies operating in the U.S., but they all lacked efficiency. Rockefeller changed that by buying out the small companies and combining them into one giant corporation. He quickly gained control of the oil industry and became immensely rich. To hear more about the dark side of Rockefeller, check out our video on Standard Oil. The Second Industrial Revolution changed the world. Everything from skyscrapers to submarines were made possible during this time period. Life expectancy increased, birth rate increased, and so did the standard of living. Cities became larger, busier, and more densely populated. And not only were people living longer, but they were living better. The future looked bright, and it was only the beginning.